Every memory she recalled was terrible. No ethics. Ignoring humanity, constantly chasing only results. Memories of conducting such experiments one after another and reveling in them. She didn't want to admit it, but all of them were things Twilight had done. As a result of losing the correct personality, Twilight had committed every evil imaginable. Base and vulgar high disciples like Jahal followed in his footsteps, doing whatever they pleased. Because he tampered with the races the divine ancestor was trying to create, he was also the cause of the birth of evil existences like Jahal. It meant the timing of the personality transfer experiment was bad. Even before her memories returned, Luminous had been cleaning up Twilight's messes without realizing it, but she hadn't been able to take care of everything. The fact remained that he had caused trouble in many quarters. Understanding this, Luminous also had a headache. Very well. Your misdeeds are also my responsibility. I will look after things, so you may disappear in peace. Don't screw with me. I won't admit it. I won't admit something like that. Twilight screamed like a spoiled child. Behind him, Luminous appeared, having closed the distance in an instant. While driving a knee into Twilight, Luminous whispered in his ear. I do not require your approval. What matters is the truth. Saying so, Luminous held her arm up to the heavens. Her beloved blade, Nitrose, had shattered, but Luminous still possessed the sword entrusted to her by Veldanava, back when she was the divine ancestor. The strongest sword, so powerful she hesitated to use it. That is, its name was Dharma. The summoned Dharma fitted perfectly in Luminous's hand. It was her first time touching it in that form, yet it seemed to accept her as its master. As proof, the shape of Dharma transformed to look exactly like Nitrose. Give it back. Give back my sword. Precisely because he had the memories, Twilight was terrified. Because if that were used, he would have no choice but to resign himself to the fact that he had no chance of winning. Luminous glanced at such a Twilight with pity. Come to think of it, you are also a victim of my experiment. Your deeds are unforgivable, but that is all my responsibility as well. At the very least, I shall let you pass without suffering. Honestly speaking, it was reluctant for Luminous as well. The one who conducted the experiment was the divine ancestor, and Luminous could rather be said to be on the victim's side. The worst incidents caused by Twilight, the empty shell of the ancestor. Luminous was the one running around cleaning up after them, and she didn't think, nor did she want to think, that a part of that responsibility lay with her. However, sadly, because the memory of conducting the experiment had taken root, she could no longer make irresponsible statements. Sadness, anger, guilt, such complex emotions clashed, leaving her in a strange mood. Viewed from that perspective, Twilight before her was the ancestor, yet not the ancestor. As she thought of him as merely an experimental subject, pity naturally welled up. Therefore, Luminous resolved to deliver the final blow to Twilight with the utmost mercy. Stop. Luminous's authority had evolved from the ultimate skill-lustful King Asmodeus to good light King Hermaza. Luminous's weapon had changed from God grade to Genesis grade. Luminous's existence value now exceeded 20 million. The value of Dharma would be added to that, but what the current Luminous could draw out was a little over 20 million, meaning the grand total exceeded 40 million. And then, she unleashed her ultimate secret technique. Sleep in peace. Requiem for the dead. Ah. That was the end of it. Amidst that tranquility, Twilight realized his own mistakes. He recalled everything and understood that Luminous had been right all along. And then, turning into dust, he returned to Luminous. Incidentally, there were those who had been watching this unfold. There were the survivors among the divine ancestors' high disciples, currently calling themselves the Trinity Wisemen in a certain small nation. They had hoped to curry favor with Luminous if the opportunity arose, but that scheme crumbled all too easily. Honestly, I have a lot to say about this, but we finally overcame our weakness to sunlight, yet we didn't even get a moment to shine. It can't be helped. We don't even need to run the calculations to know that our participation would be meaningless. And so, they retreated with their tails between their legs, or so the story goes. However, that had absolutely nothing to do with Luminous. The King of Vice had vanished. At that moment, the sound of applause rang out. Is that rain? As expected of Lady Luminous. That was a magnificent display of skill. As glib as ever. Rain's frivolity was nothing new. Luminous was exasperated, noting that this time was no different. No, I was fully prepared to assist, but it seems there was no need for me to step in. Ha, you don't mean a word of that. I was quite serious. After all, I absolutely hated that piece of trash, Twilight. Rain said this with a straight face. Luminous, though exasperated, found herself agreeing. Regarding that matter, I have caused you trouble as well. Allow me to apologize. No, it is not your fault, Lady Luminous. Believe it or not, I actually do respect you. This statement was Rain's honest feeling. She detested the divine ancestor Twilight, but she loved Luminous. So, the current Lady Luminous is the Demon Lord Luminous, am I correct in assuming that? Rain asked timidly. She was asking if this was the Luminous who had inherited the name bestowed by Veldanava. For Rain, this was a fact she had only just learned by overhearing their earlier conversation. Consequently, the reality was that she had been too shocked to do anything but watch. Even Twilight, whom she had always loathed, was a creation of Veldanava. She had wondered how such a failure could exist, and to find out the reason was that he was an experimental subject created by separating his own memories and personality, left her feeling a mix of shock and exasperation. Well, that explains how such a scumbag was born, Rain thought, feeling entirely convinced. However, now things were different. It appeared that the memories and experiences of the divine ancestor had been integrated into the will of Luminous, a person of character. Rain felt it necessary to confirm to what extent she was still the same Luminous she knew. About that. I am the me that you know. Since my consciousness is the dominant one, the me that was the divine ancestor has gone to sleep. Or rather, he has already been completely integrated. That was Luminous's answer. Luminous had lived her life as Luminous. The reality was simply that the divine ancestor's memories had been added on top of that. Therefore, the various powers inherited from the divine ancestor now belonged to Luminous as well. In other words, Luminous had gained the ability to freely manipulate the ultimate skills Lord of Vice, Anger Minyu and Lord of Goodness, Ahura Mazda. In fact, she could even alter her appearance at will. If her current female form was Luminous, she could transform into Twilight by assuming a male form. The divine ancestor originally had no gender to begin with, but Luminous still felt a bit odd about this particular point. Having answered Rain's question, Luminous shifted her mindset. She returned her focus to the battlefield and assessed the situation. Did Misery maintain the secret art of sanctuary in my stead? That must have been difficult. She has done me a great service. It is quite alright. Misery is excellent, after all. Rain nodded at Luminous's praise of Misery, boasting as if it were about herself. This, too, was typical behavior, so Luminous simply let it slide. She had known Rain for a long time. Luminous was well aware of her personality. As for Rain, she was optimistically rejoicing, thinking, from now on, Lady Luminous is the divine ancestor, so everything is just perfect. In high spirits, she quickly contacted Misery to convey Luminous's return. Lady Luminous, I hear you are able to return to the front lines. Would it be alright to have you take over the sanctuary? Yumu. I have caused you trouble, Misery. Luminous conversed via thought communication while flying toward Misery. Rain followed close behind. As soon as they met up, Luminous exercised her power. You have been a great help. Leave the rest to me and rest for a while. No, if my humble efforts have been of use, then I could ask for no greater joy. Divine mercy rained down upon the battlefield. Luminous had activated Sanctuary Resurrection. Misery, too, was relieved to have successfully completed the handover. She immediately shifted to supporting Luminous, contributing to reducing the casting time. Rain acted as a guard, protecting both Luminous and Misery. It might have looked like she was doing the least amount of work, but that was surely just imagination. Thus, stability was restored to the battlefield that had been in a critical state. On the eastern front, Hinata, Calgurio, and the others were struggling against the humanoid cryptids, the aides of the world-destroying Dragon Ivorage. Keeping them in his sights, Benimaru provided support. Though he called it support, his firepower was on a completely different level. Disappear, you trash. Dark Flame Prison. To prevent interference in the high-level battles, he continued to annihilate the cryptids swarming to break the holy field. Benimaru stood at the eastern anchor point maintained by Cardinal Nicholas. Since it was the dead center of the enemy's target, there was no shortage of prey. Despite the situation, Benimaru's expression was bright. Ever since learning of Remuru's return, he was convinced that defeat was no longer possible. He cut down the approaching cryptids with a single stroke. To Benimaru, even the high-ranking individuals were no match for him. Even the weakest among them rivaled a Demon Lord seed, but for the current Benimaru, they were easy opponents. They possessed neither martial arts nor high intelligence. He recognized that anything other than the evolved humanoid types was not a threat. Of course, from the perspective of the Crusaders and the Imperial Guardians, this was a statement that would make them want to scream, "Are you kidding me?" But it was fine. Benimaru did not base his strategies on his own strength, so at least in that regard, they could rest easy. Meanwhile, the ones standing out on the battlefield were the 200 members of the Black Numbers under Tensura's command. With the Empress back and watching over them, it was only natural that they were fired up. The thought of slacking off had never existed to begin with, but the atmosphere now dictated that not even a single mistake would be forgiven. If anything, they seemed to fear what was behind them more than the enemy in front of them. Well, thanks to their efforts, the battlefield was beginning to stabilize, so Benimaru had no complaints. Hang in there, you guys. He cheered, watching them with a sense of lukewarm amusement.